Marcus Carter lived in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. He was a graphic designer who spent most of his days working from home. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with plants and books, a reflection of his calm personality. Marcus loved his work, and his clients often praised his creativity and attention to detail. That morning, he felt particularly productive. His newest project, a logo design for a nonprofit organization, was coming together perfectly. The sun streamed through his window, and the soft hum of his computer kept him focused. When the clock struck noon, his stomach reminded him it was time for a break. "Guess it's lunchtime," he said to himself, standing to stretch. Marcus decided to walk to the corner convenience store to grab a quick snack. It was a short walk, and he always enjoyed getting fresh air. As he stepped outside, the world around him felt peaceful. The cool breeze brushed against his face, and birds chirped in the distance. Neighbors passed him with polite nods, though some avoided eye contact, something Marcus had gotten used to over the years. He didn't dwell on it. The convenience store was a small, familiar spot where Marcus often went to grab essentials. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, and the faint smell of coffee and fresh bread greeted him. He picked up a sandwich, a bottle of water, and a small bag of chips. The clerk behind the counter, an older man named Mr. Patel, smiled warmly. "Busy day, Marcus." "Yeah, pretty busy," Marcus replied with a nod. "Needed a little break. How's it going for you?" "Oh, the usual. Can't complain." Mr. Patel rang up the items, and Marcus handed over the cash. As Marcus turned to leave, he noticed two men standing near the shelves of candy and snacks. They were talking loudly, their laughter echoing through the small store. He didn't pay much attention, assuming they were just having a good time. Outside, the sun was still shining, and Marcus was thinking about how to spend his evening when he heard the store's door swing open behind him. The two men had followed him out, and their laughter now carried a different tone, mocking and sharp. Marcus didn't look back. He kept walking, his pace steady. But as the men's voices grew louder, he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his chest. "Hey, buddy," one of them shouted. "Where do you think you're going?" Marcus stopped for a moment, unsure if they were talking to him. When he turned slightly, he saw them staring directly at him. Their expressions weren't friendly. He took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Is there a problem?" he asked politely. The men exchanged glances and smirked. "No problem at all," one of them said, stepping closer. "Just wanted to have a little chat." Marcus knew this was not a friendly conversation. The peaceful day he'd started was beginning to take a sharp turn. Marcus felt the tension in the air as the two men moved closer to him. He clutched the small bag of groceries in his hand and tried to remain calm. His heart was beating faster, but he knew better than to show fear. "I don't think we need to talk," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "I'm just heading home." One of the men, taller with a shaved head, let out a mocking laugh. "What's the rush? We're just being friendly." The other man, shorter but with a stocky build, added, "Yeah, don't be rude now. Stay and talk with us for a minute." Marcus looked around the street, hoping someone might be nearby. The area seemed unusually empty for the middle of the day. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said, taking a step back. "Trouble?" The taller man grinned, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Who said anything about trouble?" Suddenly, the shorter man moved closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "What's in the bag?" he asked, nodding at Marcus's groceries. "Just my lunch," Marcus replied, keeping his tone calm. The man smirked and snatched the bag out of Marcus's hand. "Let's see what you've got here." Marcus clenched his fists but kept them at his sides. "Give it back," he said firmly. The taller man stepped between Marcus and his bag. "Or what?" he challenged, his tone sharp. Marcus's patience was running thin. He had done everything to avoid a confrontation, but these men were clearly looking for trouble. He took a deep breath, hoping they would lose interest and walk away. But instead, the shorter man shoved Marcus hard, forcing him to stumble back. "What are you gonna do, huh?" he taunted. That was the moment Marcus realized he couldn't back down any further. He straightened himself and looked the man in the eye. "I don't want to fight, but if you put your hands on me again, I will defend myself." The men laughed as if Marcus's words were a joke. "Defend yourself," the taller one said, his grin widening. "Let's see you try." Before Marcus could react, the shorter man lunged at him again. But this time, Marcus was ready. He dodged the man's grab and pushed him back firmly, making it clear he wasn't going to be an easy target. The taller man tried to grab Marcus from behind, but Marcus twisted out of his grip. Using quick reflexes, he managed to step away, creating some distance between himself and the men. "Leave me alone," Marcus said, his voice louder now, filled with determination. The confrontation caught the attention of someone inside the store. Mr. Patel appeared at the door, shouting, "What's going on out here?" The two men hesitated for a moment, glancing at each other. But before anyone could do anything, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Someone must have called the police. Marcus felt a small sense of relief, thinking the situation was about to end. But he had no idea that things were about to get much worse. The police car pulled up quickly, its sirens piercing the quiet street. Marcus stood still, his hands at his sides, as two officers stepped out of the car. The two men who had been harassing him suddenly changed their demeanor, looking concerned and even pointing toward Marcus. "There he is," the shorter man shouted, his voice filled with fake outrage. "He attacked us." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's not true," he said, his voice firm but calm. "They were harassing me. I was defending myself." The taller man stepped forward, clutching his arm as if he were hurt. "We didn't do anything to him," he said, shaking his head. "He just went crazy and started swinging at us." The officers exchanged glances, and one of them approached Marcus. "Sir, we need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back," the officer said. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Wait, hold on," he said, trying to stay calm. "I didn't do anything wrong. Check the store's security cameras. They'll show everything." "Sir, I'm not going to ask again," the officer said, his tone more forceful now. Marcus looked over at Mr. Patel, who was still standing in the doorway of the store. "Mr. Patel," Marcus called out, "please tell them what happened." Mr. Patel hesitated, his expression conflicted. "I didn't see everything," he said quietly. "I was inside the store." Marcus's heart sank. He couldn't believe what was happening. He raised his hand slowly, complying with the officer's orders. "I didn't attack anyone," he said again, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. The officer handcuffed Marcus and led him toward the police car. The two men stood by, smirking as if they had already won. As Marcus sat in the back of the car, he replayed the incident in his mind. He knew he had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, treated like a criminal. His stomach churned with frustration and disbelief. At the police station, Marcus was processed and placed in a holding cell. The cold metal bench and the stark walls made the reality of his situation even more unbearable. He had never been in trouble with the law before, and now he was being accused of something he didn't do. Hours later, an officer finally came to speak with him. "We've got statements from the two men," the officer said, sitting across from Marcus. "They're saying you attacked them without provocation." "That's not true," Marcus said firmly. "I was defending myself. They were the ones who started it." The officer didn't seem convinced. "We'll look into it," he said, though his tone lacked sincerity. Marcus sat alone in the cell, his mind racing. He knew the truth, but would anyone believe him? He felt trapped, not just physically, but by a system that seemed determined to ignore his side of the story. The hours in the holding cell felt like days to Marcus. He stared at the cold walls, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The worst part was knowing that no one seemed to believe him. The two men had made their accusations, and now it was his word against theirs. When Marcus was finally allowed to make a phone call, he dialed his mom's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice full of concern. "Marcus, what's going on? You're not at home." "Mom, I'm okay. But I need you to listen," he said, trying to stay calm. "I've been arrested. They're saying I attacked two men, but I was just defending myself. I need your help." There was a long pause before his mom spoke again. "What happened, Marcus? Tell me everything." Marcus explained the situation, his voice shaking slightly as he recounted the events outside the store. "I don't know what else I could have done. I tried to walk away, but they wouldn't let me. And then one of them shoved me." "Don't worry, we'll figure this out," his mom said, her voice reassuring. "I'll call a lawyer right away." After hanging up, Marcus felt a small sense of relief. At least his family believed him. But he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The truth might be on his side, but the system didn't always work that way, especially for someone like him. A few hours later, Marcus was introduced to Mia, a lawyer his family had hired. She was a tall woman with short, dark hair and a determined expression. She wasted no time getting to work, asking Marcus for every detail of the encounter. "Marcus, I believe you," Maya said as she took notes. "But the challenge is proving it. The witnesses we've spoken to are all siding with the other two men, and the police report is biased, too." Marcus sighed. "I told the officers the truth, but they didn't listen. The two men had already made up their story, and I guess that's what they believed." Mia nodded. "Unfortunately, that's often how it works. They saw two men who looked like victims, and well, you don't exactly fit the image of someone they'd think of as a victim." Marcus's heart sank. He knew exactly what Mia meant. Being black in a world where prejudice existed in every corner meant that sometimes, no matter how right you were, your skin color could make people assume the worst about you. "Don't worry," Maya said, noticing the look on his face. "We'll fight this. We'll get the security footage from the store, and I'll start working on clearing your name. But be prepared, Marcus. It won't be easy. The system doesn't always work in your favor, especially when you're up against bias." Marcus nodded, trying to hold on to the hope that Mia's faith in him would be enough to change things. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight ahead was going to be much harder than he had ever imagined. The next few days felt like a blur to Marcus. He was released from jail on bail, but the weight of the situation hung heavily over him. The court date was set, and the pressure was building. He knew he had to stay strong, but the constant worry about what might happen next was overwhelming. Mia, his lawyer, had been working tirelessly to prepare his defense. She spent hours reviewing the store's security footage, tracking down witnesses, and making phone calls to anyone who might help. Slowly, they started to piece together a stronger case. "You're doing great, Marcus," Maya said during one of their meetings. "The footage from the store will show that you were just defending yourself. We have a witness who's willing to testify, and I'm gathering more evidence. We'll be ready for court." But even as Mia worked hard, Marcus couldn't help but feel a growing sense of doubt. He'd heard the stories, the ones about people who were wrongly accused and never had the chance to clear their names. He couldn't let that happen to him. "I just don't get it," Marcus said, running a hand through his hair. "Why is this happening to me? I didn't do anything wrong." Mia paused, looking at him with a soft but serious expression. "Marcus, I know this is hard, but unfortunately, we live in a world where people sometimes don't see us the way we really are. They see you as a threat before they even get to know you. That's not your fault, but it's something we have to fight against." Her words stuck with him. Marcus knew she was right. There were times in his life when he'd noticed the way people looked at him differently, the way his actions were sometimes judged more harshly than others. But this was different. This wasn't just a quick glance or a whispered comment. It was a legal battle, and it was about his future. As the court date drew closer, Marcus found it harder to focus on his daily life. He still worked on his graphic design projects, but his mind kept drifting back to the case. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was riding on what would happen in that courtroom. Mia kept reassuring him. "We've got this. The truth is on your side. We just have to show the court what really happened." But the more Marcus thought about the trial, the more questions flooded his mind. What if the jury didn't believe him? What if they saw him as just another black man caught up in a misunderstanding? What if his life was forever changed by a moment he never asked for? His fears were real, and as much as he tried to stay positive, he couldn't ignore the feeling of being trapped. The system seemed to be against him, and he couldn't help but wonder if justice was really possible. But Mia didn't let him give up. "We'll be ready, Marcus. We'll show them the truth. You just have to stay strong and trust me. I believe in you." Her words gave him a little hope, but the road ahead still felt long and uncertain. As the trial date loomed closer, Marcus felt like the world was closing in around him. The weight of the situation was always on his mind. He couldn't escape the feeling that the whole system was working against him, but Mia kept pushing him to stay strong. "We need to keep moving forward," she said one afternoon, reviewing some of the documents she had gathered. "The security footage from the store is key. We'll use that to prove you didn't start anything. And I've been talking to a few more witnesses who saw what happened." Marcus nodded, but the doubt that had been growing inside him didn't go away. He had heard stories about how the truth didn't always matter in court, especially for people like him. His fears about the bias he might face kept nagging at him. "I just don't understand why they'd believe them over me," Marcus said, frustration clear in his voice. "I know I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to leave." Mia leaned back in her chair and sighed. "The truth isn't always enough to change people's minds, Marcus. But we have something they can't ignore. The footage, the witnesses, and your own testimony. It's all there." Still, Marcus felt uneasy. He tried to focus on the good things, like the fact that Mia was working so hard to help him. She had been so determined, always finding new ways to support his case. She had even managed to track down a few more people who were at the store that day, and they were willing to speak up for him. One of the most important pieces of evidence was the security footage from the store. Mia had managed to get a copy, and as soon as Marcus saw it, he felt a bit of relief. It clearly showed the two men harassing him first, with no sign of Marcus initiating any kind of conflict. It wasn't the full story, but it was a big part of it. "It's not perfect," Mia said, watching Marcus as he studied the video. "But it's enough to make a difference. We'll use this to show that you acted in self-defense." But the real breakthrough came when one of the witnesses, a woman who had been in the store buying groceries, reached out to Mia. She had seen the entire incident and was willing to testify. She had noticed the way the two men had blocked Marcus's way and how they were the ones who got physical first. "I know this might be hard for you," Mia said, sitting down across from Marcus. "But this woman is our strongest witness. If she backs up your story in court, it'll be huge." Marcus couldn't believe it. For the first time in a while, he felt like he might have a chance. This woman could help prove that he wasn't the aggressor, and that made all the difference. He still felt nervous about the upcoming trial, but Mia's words gave him some hope. "We've got this, Marcus," she said. "We're going to show them the truth. Just trust in the process." It wasn't easy, but Marcus was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would work out. The day of the trial finally arrived, and Marcus felt a mix of nerves and determination. His mind raced as he stood outside the courthouse, looking up at the tall building before him. Everything felt bigger now. The weight of the case, the pressure to prove his innocence, it was all starting to feel real. Mia met him at the entrance. She was dressed in a sharp suit, her usual calm and professional demeanor shining through. "Ready?" she asked, giving him a small smile. Marcus nodded, though he could feel his stomach tightening. "I guess so," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The defense table was neatly arranged with papers, files, and a laptop. Marcus sat down, trying to focus on what was happening, but his mind kept drifting to the two men who had accused him. They sat across the room, looking confident. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were planning to twist the truth. The judge entered the room, and everyone stood in respect. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor was quick to paint Marcus as the aggressor, emphasizing the fact that he had been involved in an altercation. The defendant acted without provocation, the prosecutor said, his voice firm. He physically attacked two men, and there's no evidence to support his claims of self-defense. Marcus clenched his fists, his heart racing. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Everything the prosecutor said felt like a lie. But he tried to stay calm. This was just the beginning. And Mia was prepared. When it was Mia's turn to speak, she stood up and addressed the court with a calm confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what we're asking you to do today is to look at the facts. We have evidence that shows my client, Marcus Carter, was simply trying to leave a situation where he was being harassed. The security footage from the store shows the two accusers approaching Marcus first. They provoked him, and he had no choice but to defend himself." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope as he listened to Mia's words. She was making it clear that he wasn't the one who had started the fight. She spoke with such conviction that for a moment, Marcus allowed himself to believe that things might go in his favor. Mia then called the key witness to the stand, the woman who had seen everything in the store. She was calm as she took the oath and spoke clearly about what she had observed. "I saw the two men approach him," she testified. "They were blocking his way, and then one of them pushed him. Marcus didn't do anything to provoke them. He tried to step around them, but they wouldn't let him." As the witness spoke, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The truth was finally being heard. Mia was right. It was about showing the facts, and the facts were on his side. After the witness finished her testimony, the defense rested its case. The prosecutor tried to cast doubt, questioning the witness's memory and trying to discredit the security footage, but Mia held her ground. "Do not let the smoke and mirrors distract you," she said. "We have the truth on our side." Marcus knew there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, he felt like there was a real chance for justice. The trial wasn't over, but he could finally see a light at the end of the tunnel. The courtroom felt even quieter than before as the jury filed in to deliver its verdict. Marcus could feel his heart beating faster with every step they took. He sat in his chair, trying to remain calm, but the uncertainty of the outcome weighed heavily on him. His palms were sweaty, and his mind kept replaying the moments of the trial. He had told the truth, and Mia had fought hard for him, but now it was out of their hands. The judge looked at the jury, who all nodded in unison. "The jury has reached a verdict," the judge announced. "Will the foreperson please stand?" The foreperson, a woman in her 50s, stood up and addressed the court. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Carter, not guilty of all charges." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The words seemed to echo in his mind. Not guilty. He had won. He was free. He looked over at Mia, who was smiling, her eyes filled with relief. She stood up and shook his hand. "You did it, Marcus. You got through this." Marcus stood up slowly, his legs feeling a bit weak as the reality of the verdict set in. He turned to face the two men who had accused him. They were sitting still, their expressions unreadable. Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. He had been through so much, but now, finally, it was over. The judge gave his final instructions, telling Marcus he was free to go. The prosecutor didn't say a word as he gathered his papers. Maya led Marcus out of the courtroom, her hand on his shoulder in support. As they walked out into the hallway, Marcus could hardly believe it. He had spent days, even weeks, dreading this moment, unsure of how it would end. But now, with the trial behind him, he felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. "You're free," Maya said, smiling. You don't have to worry about this anymore. Marcus nodded, still processing what had just happened. Thank you, Mia. I don't think I could have done this without you. Mia laughed softly. You did the hard part. I just helped you show the truth. The door to the courthouse opened, and Marcus stepped outside into the sunlight. It was the first time in days he felt like he could breathe again. The world seemed brighter, lighter somehow, as if a dark cloud had finally been lifted from above him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from his mom. I knew you could do it, Marcus. I'm so proud of you. A smile spread across Marcus's face. He could finally relax. But as he stood there, he knew this experience had changed him. The truth had won today, but Marcus would always remember the struggles he had faced. He would carry the lessons from this trial with him, knowing how important it was to speak up, to fight for what was right, and to never let anyone silence your story. For now, though, he could finally look forward to a future without this burden. He had won, and that was enough for today. The days following the trial felt like a whirlwind. Marcus was finally free, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been changed forever. He had always known that the world could be unfair at times, but he had never felt it so strongly until now. It wasn't just about the trial or the verdict. It was about the way people saw him, and the challenges he still had to face in the future. When Marcus returned to his apartment after the trial, it felt different. The walls that had once seemed comforting now felt empty, like they were holding the weight of everything that had happened. The peaceful quiet he had enjoyed before was now tinged with the reality of what he had been through. But as the days passed, Marcus began to feel a small shift within himself. The trial had taken so much from him, but it had also given him something in return: strength. He realized that even in the face of adversity, he had stood his ground. He had fought for his truth, and that was something no one could take away from him. One afternoon, Mia called him. Marcus, I've been thinking, she said, her voice thoughtful. What you went through is important. You can make a difference with your story. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean that your experience can inspire others, Mia explained. So many people go through similar struggles, and they feel like their voices don't matter. You can be the one to speak out, to show others that it's possible to stand up for yourself and find justice. Marcus sat back in his chair, considering her words. He had never thought of it like that before. You're right, he said slowly. I've been so focused on just getting through this that I never stopped to think about how it could help others. Mia continued, You've been through something difficult, but you've made it through. You can use that to show people that they don't have to stay silent, that they have a right to defend themselves and seek justice. Marcus felt a sense of purpose beginning to take root inside him. He had always been the kind of person who preferred to stay out of the spotlight, but now he saw how much good could come from sharing his story. He could help others who felt powerless, show them that they weren't alone. In the weeks that followed, Marcus began speaking out at local events about his experience. He talked about how the justice system had let him down at first, but how he had never given up on proving the truth. People listened to his story, and many thanked him for sharing. He also started working with organizations that supported people who faced discrimination and bias. It became clear to him that the fight didn't stop after the trial. It was just the beginning. Marcus realized that even though the trial had been the most difficult time of his life, it had also opened his eyes to something much bigger than himself. As he stood before an audience one evening, sharing his story, Marcus felt proud. He had made it through, and now he was using his experience to help others. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he also knew that he was stronger than ever before. I did this for me, he said, looking out at the crowd. But I'm doing it for all of us. Because when we fight for what's right, we all win.